It being 6 o'clock, I'm going to call the Tuesday, January 21st, 2025 meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order, and we will begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And there's no need for a roll call vote because we're all here. All right, so we have a couple of announcements. This meeting is being recorded by the local scene. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should notify the chair at this time. Nobody. Financial assistance applications are available on the town's website or by calling the Selectmen's office. For anyone interested in volunteering, there are several vacancies on various committees and boards. To see a complete list of the openings, please visit our website at kingstonma.gov, and also check the website for any additional events or notices at, again, www.kingstonma.gov. Any other announcements from the rest of the board before we get going? No? All right, we now have time for open forum. Is there anybody who wanted to speak at open forum, either here in the room or online? Seeing nobody, we're going to move on to our appointments. Our appointment is, last week during our meeting, we decided to set up the meeting for tonight to put together a working group so that we can take a deeper dive into the FY26 budget before our meeting next week. There's certainly a lot of challenges in our budget this year. The schools are looking at some massive increases, and we don't have final budgets from them. But without overrides, the schools are going to be making massive cuts to positions. It's not just going to be supplies and technology and projects. It's going to be teachers and paras and other staff, regardless, unless there is an override. I believe the regional budget, correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, but the regional school budget, I believe, was $2 million over. And then the local schools are 1.7 million over the 4% that we had originally allocated. So we're looking at potentially some big overrides. Then within the town department, last week we discussed basically a 4.12% increase townwide, giving the fire department and police department a little bit more, some other departments a little bit less because they don't have as many increases. But we need to kind of go through this whole budget, probably take a look at fire and police tonight in a deep dive. Without an override, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, it looks like we're still going to have to, if we don't have an override, the police budget, even with it being a little bit higher, they will still potentially lose bodies. There are requests for additional staff from police. So we're still looking at, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that tonight. If we were to approve the additional requests for the additional positions in the police department, it would require an override. Fire department, we're going to hear from both of the chiefs tonight to kind of go through these, through their budgets. Before we move forward, are there any questions or comments about what we're doing here tonight before we move forward?
I still think it's a little premature to be placing the override, like we're definitely moving forward with an override. We don't know that yet.
We're not.
We haven't gone through the
Correct.
budgets, and when it comes to schools, we have no line item autonomy
Correct.
of that. That's all them. They have that under their purview. So
Right.
with that said, we determine what this budget sort of looks like, and how much of that goes to schools is usually based on what they tell us they need. I've argued this in prior meetings. I think we need to be looking at this a little differently and saying, this is how much we have, and then this percentage goes to the town, and this percentage goes to the schools. Then they have as much time as they need to figure out what that budget looks like, but at least we've given them a number that they can work with. Historically, that's been around 53%, I believe. So if we are looking at, I don't know what we want to be able to leave with excess levy capacity. I don't know if we're to the point where we just can't have excess levy capacity. But if we wanted to have X number of dollars in levy capacity, what does that leave us with? And then what is 47% of that number? And then we make sure that we have a budget before us that fits under that umbrella, giving the schools whatever that 53% number is.
And you know what, I have not seen, I don't recall what the exact percentage was of the budget that you put together, giving them a 4% increase, or what percentage that is, but I think it was, with just the 4%, I think they were still around 53%.
It's 53%.
So if we do that, I know we haven't said we're doing an override, we're just talking about it in generic terms, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that we are going to have to agree on doing, and we have not done that. We're just, through all of our budget meetings, we're looking at these numbers, and if the town wants level services, we're going to, in my opinion, it's going to require an override. If we're okay with cutting back on some services, whichever departments they are, school, police, fire, streets and highway, whatever it is, library, then we'll go down that road and figure that out.
My fear is that an override will likely fail, given the increased costs people are facing outside of just town costs, but also increases in water and sewer. People are really hurting. And I think anywhere that we can try to reduce that burden for them is ideal. How we do that,
Right.
I'm not sure.
And I know I'm jumping the gun again, talking about an override, but one of the things I keep coming back to, when we did this before, in '08 and '13, it was just, I think I got the year right, it wasn't 11, it was 13.
13, yeah.
Yeah, so that was just the school, and it was 390,000. Back in '08, there were three different, it was broken up. I don't remember if it was three different warrant articles, but there was one for the elementary, there was one for the regional, and then there was one for the town. And the town, I believe, was police and fire, if I remember correctly. But I can't remember how the votes went at town meeting. I know that the two school ones did pass, the town one did not. So I know in terms of the warrant articles, what I was thinking is that we would potentially have, and again, I know I'm jumping the gun, but it still lays out the basis for some of my thinking and how I approach this, have two different warrant articles, one at a higher override amount and one at a lower. And this is where we have to figure out what services, especially with police, fire, and schools, would be retained at those different levels. And I'm just going to throw out numbers. I mean, we're talking, what is it, almost 4 million just between the two schools. So I'm just going to take a number of,
That's assuming that's what they end
I know.
up needing. We don't actually know that.
we don't. But let's just throw out some fake numbers here. I'll say 500,000 for a lower override and $1 million for a higher override, and split between those, the four, the elementary, the regional, police, and fire, if we need overrides for those. But what I'm suggesting is that each department have a lower number for that lower tiered override, and then a slightly higher number for a higher override, knowing that the residents have already spoken out, all the higher cost, inflation, higher water, sewer, electric, gas, everything's gone up crazy this year. It's going to be a tougher sell, so trying to come in with some lower numbers. And then maybe when we go to town meeting, we would vote on the higher number first. If it passes, then great, then it goes on to the ballot, and then folks can vote there. If it doesn't pass, then you go to the lower number. And try to, and maybe as the following article on the warrant. Again, I'm just talking.
I know, it's hard for me to be thinking there when we haven't even looked at the budget.
I don't know, it's just years of doing this. I don't see how we do this without an override, or we're making the decision to cut services across the town.
Yeah.
And then it comes back to who should be making that decision. If we make the decision that we're not doing an override and we're not putting it on the ballot or putting it on the town warrant, then we're making the decision for the entire town. By putting it on the warrant and in town meeting, then it's up to town meeting voters and eventually the voters at the ballots making that decision. So we're in a tough spot, where It's a big burden facing us. The town's being hit hard. We've been hit hard with costs at the schools. And then from police, we've had years of not being staffed up where we should be, having additional, and for both police and fire, additional calls, both from Baymont and from the apartments up at the mall. So there's a higher call frequency that the town is facing. So we're really going to be struggling here. So we need to kind of go through this. I was thinking tonight what we should start off with, unless anyone has another idea, maybe let Chief Douglas go first, discuss his budget and his request, and then we can have any questions for him, and then move on to Chief Holmes and the police department.
Just quickly from a high-level perspective, and this is probably for a future meeting, if an override comes to starts to be discussed fully, is I think we need that data broken down to the average household too. So we need to, it doesn't mean we're raising our rates, we're raising $2 million. What does that actually mean to the individual homeowner?
Right.
Because that's really what
And we did that back in 2013 and
Okay.
2008. I remember that because it was like, okay, the average home was worth, back then it was like 400,000.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be hit with $130, I think it was something, one of those votes, one of them I remember specifically, because I had an average house then, and I remember it was gonna be $130.
Yeah.
So I would be curious about the percentage increase, as opposed to an average dollar amount, only
I think
because
we
if
do
you
both,
say if
yeah,
it's
yeah.
the average homeowner will see a 10% increase in their taxes,
Yeah.
then you can apply it to your own taxes and you know
Correct.
what that
Yes,
means.
yeah.
As
No,
opposed
I think
to-
they did all of that, but I think what they did specifically too, I don't know why.
I just
I'm
want it
thinking
broken
this,
down
It was
to
like
that.
$400,000 was an average house, and, you know, your increase would be $130. But back then, I think our taxes were like probably half what they are now.
Yeah.
Honestly, in 2008. We're
And then,
going back that far.
and then the other information going forward would be, how is this solvable? How many years is this gonna happen? Because obviously it's a yearly override, it's not a,
Correct.
so like all that it's more just, we need to get as much possible information out there if that's what's happening.
Right. And the other thing I think is, you know, with police, I know he's asking for several, not several, but a few positions, and this is a one-time thing. If we don't do it, he's gonna ask again next year or the year after, for these positions. My understanding, I mean, police doesn't get hit like schools do. Schools are, there's a lot more costs, there's a lot more variability, state aid, there's so much more that's hitting the schools. So an override for the police department, if you did it at one time, arguably shouldn't be doing this again. There shouldn't be other surprise costs. And same with fire, I would think. Schools, we could do an override this year, just like last year was a 10% increase, I think, on the elementary last year, something like that. And the arguments from a lot of people, Kim, even you were saying, well, we're going to get hit harder next year. And we did, you know, and there's nothing to say we won't next year.
As a reminder,
I know.
I voted no on last
know.
year's budget.
Yep.
I didn't have too many solutions though, so. to be
No,
fair.
so I mean, last year, luckily, we could do it, well, I shouldn't say luckily. We did it without an override. We did it within, but we ate up a lot of our excess levy capacity, which we had done very well for several years without having to do. But the schools that hit last year was hard. I mean, again, we're getting hit again this year. So, and no guarantee that we won't get hit again next year or the following year.
And then regarding long-term, and I don't know if, I believe I remember seeing it at some point in an email, so if I'm wrong, I apologize, but has water looked into asking for more capacity with what's available, with, I remember seeing something that they can request more capacity.
From the state to
So
bring
if
up
they
more water.
haven't, why haven't they? How do we? They have, okay, and the state said no, or?
Well, so I had conversations with the state probably a month or 6 weeks ago. It was a follow-up conversation to a conversation I had at a meeting that I attended at Oak Colony Planning, a regional water meeting, where I was, I guess in my point of view, was fortunate enough to sit next to somebody from DEP of the state. I don't know if he felt the same way after the questions I was asking him, but the challenge, and I asked him specifically, could the town of Kingston or could the town of Kingston ask for additional water to be withdrawn from our wells? His answer was, you can. The challenge right now, or at that point anyways, has been that our unaccounted for water went from 10%, in 2022, I think, to 17% in '23 to 22%. I may be a year off, I apologize. But the last submittal from the Kingston Water Department showed or reflected a 22% unaccounted for water amount, meaning for every 100 gallons that come out of the ground, they don't know where 22 gallons of that went. In speaking to the water superintendent a couple of times, he's mentioned that they've had a company come in and do some sort of a unaccounted for water audit. What he indicated to me 2 or 3 weeks ago was that the bleeder lines at the end of a dead-end water line, so a water line, typically you want to have it looped so the water's moving continuously, so particles, sediments, minerals, things of that nature don't get just don't sit in the line, which it impacts the water quality for the people at the end of those dead-end lines, and it creates some challenges with the actual water pipe. So what he indicated to me was there were the meters at the end of those bleeder lines were not recording the amount of water coming out of those bleeders accurately. That was, I would guess, at least 2 months ago. I haven't asked him recently where that stands. Valerie had reached out to the water superintendent last week. Old Colony Planning had identified a grant for a complete water audit that the water department has chosen not to pursue because they had a water audit that they had done recently. So I don't have specifics on where that stands. The last I had spoken to the water superintendent, he said it's going to take a bit of time to identify whether or not the meters that have been placed at the end of these bleeder lines are recording more accurately and have determined what percentage of that 22% of unaccounted for water is coming from those bleeder lines. But the state, and it makes sense, we want you to find where you're losing all your water
Before
we
we
give
get
you
more.
more.
Yeah, makes sense. So are they treating this as code red? Because this sounds like something that needs to be, I mean, that's our revenue source.
It is. I mean, that,
And-
we talk about, there's several reasons why we're in the position that we're in. One of those certainly is because of a lack of new growth that we've had to account for to some degree in fiscal 25's budget and even more so in fiscal 26. Because the water department and the water commission specifically are autonomous, I don't know, is my answer. Frankly, I've tried to ask some questions and gotten some answers back, but I think it's a question that we could certainly ask the water commissioner specifically, and I think in their minds it's something that's important to them, but it's been several months now. I don't know where they stand, how much of that 22% has been addressed, and are they moving as quickly as possible? Because again, it's not solely because of the challenges in the water that we have available to us, but it's certainly a piece of it.
And the other thing to keep in mind is up at the mall, they are looking at now moving forward with some renovation, some building, but we're still 3 years off from that revenue. But, I think we need to push the Water Commission on the ability to be able to tap more water.
Yeah.
Because it's there. It's not that the water isn't there. It's that
Yeah.
the state won't let us get get up.
And one of the things, in fairness to the water department, one of the questions that I don't have an answer to at this point, is, given the current infrastructure we have, the wells and the ability to pump water out of those wells, how much more water can our current infrastructure provide to the community based on, what's there now? And if it can't, are there any reasonable solutions? Because, the timeline for a new well, from what I'm being told, is 3 to 5 years. They were approved for funding to do the engineering work for a new well in October at Fall Town Meeting. My understanding is the water department won't be back for the funding for a new well until the annual town meeting of 2026, so a year and a half, a little over a year from now. And then it's construction time, testing, and connection to the municipal water system, so it's
Right.
timely.
All right, any other questions or comments before, and any objection to having our fire chief go first, then please? Okay. All right, chief.
We're voting next week, though, right? Not this week.
Correct.
On. So I did, good evening. I did send you each a packet last week with a ton of information in it that I hope you had time to read, digest, question if you needed to. I'm going to just go through that packet kind of quickly. Stop me if there's a spot where you'd like me to. First page was the budget request overview. That was comparisons between the FY25 budget, a request for the 26, and then the 4% potential budget. Since that was submitted, Keith and I had spoken, and we ended up reducing the number to just above the 4% for the request, so that page is not, excuse me, particularly accurate at this point. Next page, we started down through the budget itself, the line items, and let me go through those. On the personnel side, clerical union salaries, the 51113, that's my administrative assistant's salary. The next 51114, contract salaries, that's the chief and deputy's contract pay. Fire union salaries, the 1115, that is the cost of base pay, excuse me, plus stipends and associated additional pay for the union firefighters and captains. So that line is for the 24 staff, not including the call department. Next, overtime, which is going to be 1131. That's the cost of filling vacation and personal. That is not sick. That's vacation and personal, and that is budgeted at a 1-for-1 fill. So 6-person shifts fill to 6 with vacation and overtime being taken off, and that money used to fill those shifts. Holiday pay is the amount of additional pay that they receive when they work holidays, and those that are off duty receive a smaller amount of pay, just as a matter of the contractual agreement for the holiday. Sick leave is where we ended up reducing the budget. That is the amount of money that we budget to cover sick leave, like we would vacation or personal time. That covers sick and injury. To give you a little history, FY23, we spent $216,000 approximate. FY24, $257 approximate. And FY25 to date, we've spent $167. Now, keep in mind on that line that we've had a tremendous amount of injuries, unfortunately. We, at one point last year, had 4 people out injured, 3 of them long-term. 1 is returned, 1 will retire, and 1 is anticipated to return. We had hoped last month, but the doctor says differently, so we're looking at another couple to 3. But he will come back. So that's the money we use to cover those shifts. Recall jumped down to 1132. That's the amount of money we use to pay off-duty staff for responding to emergency calls. Last year, Keith and I agreed to reduce this, hoping that the additional staffing on the shifts, not knowing, of course, that we were going to have 4 injuries, would help offset that. In other words, there'd be more people on duty and less necessity to recall people. Between injuries and the increased call volume, that has not worked out that way, and we've all but expended that annual appropriation at this point. Training, 51137, that's the amount of money we use for off-duty training, if there's training that's required, fire-related training that's required or recommended, I should say. We use that amount of money for that training. Sick leave buyback is contractually agreed upon, and that is the amount of money that we use to pay folks that did not take their sick time. And that's, all of those are explained a little better than my, excuse me, hoarse voice on those pages that I just went over. The next part of the packet that I gave you is my annual report. Hopefully you read that. That gives you kind of a good overview with regards to what's been going on in the department for the past year or so, and might either cause some questions or answer some. The next pages are charts and graphs. And sometimes these visuals are very helpful in understanding, especially the upward trajectory, excuse me, of our call volume. The first one is alarms by year, ranging from 2017 to 2024. The blue would be what we classify as other non-EMS calls. The red are EMS calls. If anybody pulled out their calculator, they'll notice on a couple of these graphs that there are a couple of digits off here and there. Since we had our system hacked with ransomware, for some reason this isn't pulling the data in two categories correctly, but it's only off by very few, 10 or less calls. So that's the first page there. The second is a chart, or a spreadsheet I should say, that shows in numbers at least the simultaneous call volume concern. We jumped considerably from 23 to 24, so now 51% of our calls actually result in a second call, or not result in, but a second call comes in while we're on the first call. This is, for lack of a better description, a natural progression when you start to increase call volume. The mere fact that you're increasing the number of calls increases the percentage of time that you're going to get more than one at the same time. It's really that simple. Your average is 8.72 a day for 2024. 2025, the last 10 days, 21 days, we've done 10 per day. So we're up a bit there. The next couple of pages just show you, illustrate how the reports look before I put them into chart and graph form. So it gives us a printout of number of 2 or more, 3 or more, 4 or more. That was just for your viewing pleasure. Alarms by day of the week. Why this is important, it's the one with the 5 up in the corner. Why this is important, because numerous times we've talked about impact staffing. Impact staffing in the public safety world would be when you have a day or a night shift that has particularly more calls, and I guess it would be typically, in many places at least, the 4 to 12 or some shift like that, the evening shift. What I did was try to illustrate that this is not the case here. It's pretty consistent across the days of the week, so that we don't have an opportunity really to impact staff, for example, day staff, and make a considerable impact on how we handle our call volume. Number 6, alarms by time of day. This is pretty standard throughout the fire service. You notice your increases and your decreases. You do less at night. The challenge with the night versus the day, obviously it's dark. The more serious calls, especially fire-related, tend to be at night. Why are they more serious? One, because people are sleeping. Things like fires get going a little better when people are sleeping, obviously. They don't self-evacuate as well or as quickly. There's a whole host of reasons why working at night is a little bit more dangerous. So when we apply that to staffing, excuse me, when we apply that to staffing, we look at the day might be a little easier but a little busier. The night is a little more dangerous but less calls. As we move on to page number 7, it shows the response times. And I drew a small line at just under the 52.89%. That's the number of calls that we did. 53% approximately of calls we reached on the EMS side within 6 minutes. 6 minutes is the line we typically draw as a reference point for a cardiac arrest. In other words, someone not breathing, somebody whose heart has stopped, Brain damage begins after 6 minutes. In the area of trauma and some of the other serious medical conditions, time is of the essence. We work with something called the golden hour, get somebody to a trauma center, et cetera, et cetera. So time is of the essence. But that 6-minute line is an important line as far as the treatment of someone that's not breathing. Next few pages show our mutual aid calls. We received 127 times mutual aid last year, whereas we only gave 79. That's a significant increase for us. And I think the fact that we were running shifts a little light because we had the injuries last year, as well as, excuse me, the increased call volume, attribute to that number. That's why that number has gone up to the degree that it has. Next is ambulance billing summary. 2,394 billed responses. Billed and collected, 1,927. Amount collected, 1,698,967.55. Average collected per call is $881. That explanation is very simple. We bill some private insurance, some is Medicare. Medicare gives you whatever it is they give you, and you take it, and you can't balance bill the patient. Private insurance typically will pay the bill. So when I give you 881 as an average, that's how much across those whole 927 calls we collected per call. Some would have been $3,000, some could have been $300. The next couple of pages I think are important to digest a little bit, at least, and that shows how our accounting is done, how we bill, and what we collect. So that $1,698,967 was up $267,181 from the previous year. So that gives you an even better view of the increase in call volume. The next, page 10, is what Pro EMS provides me with every year. Actually, I usually get it a couple times a year, that shows statewide billing rates and tells us where we are approximately within those rates. And that's what we use to make the decision as to whether we want to increase rates or not. That's the chart we would have used last year. So that's all I have in terms of the packet I gave you. In terms of the reduction that we made to get to the just over 4%, I think, Keith, 5, right about 5? 5. The place that was least painful for us to take an amount of money like that from was the overtime regarding sick and injury. That's the least predictable line item. It doesn't cause us to lose any people, no layoffs, but it also reduces staffing. In certain circumstances, it reduces staffing. Staffing reductions reduce service. There's just no way around it. If we're used to doing 3,184 calls, which was last year's total, with 6 people per shift, then if you do it with 5, 4, 3, et cetera, you do reduce service a little bit, you increase response times. I can't answer how much. So that's the impact of that. How severe is the impact? I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't honestly tell you. If we have a year where we have all our staff back and we're running 6 more than we normally would, you'll see recall go down some. We'll be able to move recall money over a little bit to cover sick and injury, if that in fact were to occur, and that will help balance it all out. And unfortunately, that is where we are. I simply can't tell you the absolute impact of losing that money, but I can tell you that if that money is needed and we don't fill shifts, that will have an impact.
So I have a question. In our book, it says that you were requesting, and this is what you said, the numbers were wrong. You have 4.3 million, basically, is what you had requested, but then you're saying that you dropped it. And what we had in our book was 4.147, correct, Keith?
That was Keith's recommendation.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So Keith's recommendation, and that's the 5%, right? Is the 4.147, 514?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Mark, how much did you, you're no longer requiring the 4326. What is your number down to now?
So the number that, take out the sick fill, and what Keith has on the spreadsheet is correct, minus the sick fill, so the sick fill zeroed out.
So that, Mark, just try to maybe clarify. The difference between the recommended that was in my column and the department recommended is the amount that came out of your sick time line item to fill for illnesses or sick
Should have been
time.
down about 177.
But the department, I think, where Eric may have misunderstood what you were saying, the department requested 4,326,000. That number is correct. That's not,
Correct.
that number is what you submitted for a
Correct.
budget.
For level services?
Yes, sir. Yes,
But
ma'am.
you
Sorry.
could make 4.1 work.
I can make 0 work, but don't expect a lot.
Oh, my God. Zero work. You can't make zero work.
No, the reality, and
Right.
that is a half sarcastic answer, and it's meant to be. We can make whatever you give us work. It's how well we make it work.
Okay.
Right.
And it's what you're willing to sacrifice or provide, either way. So the least impact, as I said, with a reduction of that size, was in that area. And as I asked Keith to do, please limit it to that area. And then we don't lose staff. We maintain vacation and vacation and personal fill. But when we get sick calls or injuries, we don't fill that.
So downside, norovirus runs through the department and you get 4 guys sick. You don't have the overtime to bring people in, so you got whoever you got.
Right.
So that's scary.
Now, how do you juggle that, right? That's not an absolute. How do you
Right.
juggle that? You use a little bit of the money for vacation and personal.
Yeah.
You move it over to sick, and this is a year-long juggle. You move it over to sick, and then you short vacation coverage at some point along the way.
Right.
So the good thing about this is we can move within personnel where we need to, and we've done that.
So just for my full clarification, 4.3 is level services, the 4.1 would be no
It's like-
cuts, but there could be potential
Correct.
issues.
Yep.
Okay,
Right.
That's what okay.
And that's where we would be relying potentially on mutual aid, knowing that other towns are dealing with the exact same budget
Yeah.
issue that we are.
But mutual aid really only works as long as we also provide mutual
Yeah.
aid. as
Yeah,
needed.
the first word in mutual aid is really.
Mutual, yeah.
What was the percentage on the 4.1? Because the 9.5 is with the 4.3, correct?
Yes, so the fire department budget, fiscal '26 versus fiscal '25, in the fiscal '26 town administrator column versus fiscal '25 approved, is a 5% increase bottom line.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the question before the board, and we don't need to answer this tonight, we're not voting this tonight. Basically, Mark is saying that they can deal with the 5% budget, but there are risks associated with that. The other thing, not that we have money, but, the big thing I'm worried about is the flu or any of these other things that ran through, the police department or any other workplaces over the past 3 weeks.
So if I can, a quick comment on that. 2 reasons we're concerned about something like the flu. Today is a good example of that. They did, I think it was 9 calls by the time I left at 4:30. They had taken 8 of those calls as EMS calls, transported to both South Shore and the BI. The average wait time with patients on our stretcher was 1 hour and 20 minutes. So when they arrived at the hospital, the truck was tied up for an additional 1 hour and 20 minutes with that person on the stretcher.
Right.
They freed up. We held recall people from 11 till 4:30 that we called back to do calls. And largely, that was because of the delay that the on-duty shifts, or even actually the recall folks were working as well. It's the challenge they were having getting people off the stretchers at the hospitals. And
Right.
when you get there, there's no option.
Right.
If they're on the stretcher and you're in the hall, they're on the stretcher and you're in the hall.
Yeah, please.
For the ambulance fees, I see that we're right around the community average, looking at the numbers you gave us.
Correct.
Could we or should we consider increasing the fees?
The input or feedback, if you will, that I typically get from the billing company is try to stay somewhere under the top dog, because it draws attention. When you push the fees up high, you can, sometimes it increases the amount of challenges to your fees and so forth. If you're a little lower than the top dog, which is typically Cambridge, honestly, you just kind of get paid because you're just one of the many. So the few dollars we gained might have value in my frustration, to be honest with you.
That's fine.
Yeah,
I just,
so there's room to wiggle, though, is what you're saying.
There is.
I just thought it's worth at least asking the question, since we are right around the average, and because it's a tough budget year.
We
I think
could.
Revenues,
We
something we
could.
should be looking at.
I think
could-
not just fire.
No,
everything.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is just
Dump stickers,
potential
whatever.
opportunity, so I
Yeah.
wanted to ask the question.
Could we go up, if we went up $100, because right now well, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm reading this right. I'm looking at the BLS emergency, but should I be looking at,
Community average. is the
So
bottom.
there's three ways we bill: BLS emergency, ALS 1 emergency, ALS 2 emergency.
Got it.
The way those are broken up is based on skill level. BLS is basic life support, ALS 1 is a limited number of advanced life support skills, and ALS 2 would be, say, a severe respiratory, a cardiac, or a cardiac arrest, where you use many skills and many medications. That's how the Medicare folks had broken them up several years ago, and everybody's kind of adopted that.
right?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Just a couple of things if I could, and I haven't brought it up yet, because I thought it was maybe more appropriate to allow Chief Douglas and Chief Holmes to make their presentations. You know, again, some of the estimates we've included in the budget are conservative. We can Mark can certainly look at what we're charging for ambulance fees with the billing company. They've been, I think, pretty stand up about where we ought to be and recommendations, and they've made a lot of sense so far. So, you know, that may be worthwhile having a conversation. Last week, the state announced that the governor's revenue increase percentage will be about 2.2% on state revenues. We've estimated certainly less than that because we just didn't know. We estimated at 1.4. So there's, you know, again, if we apply the state revenue, the 2.2%, which is going to move a little bit, but it doesn't move much. You know, if we could potentially raise the state receipts from 7.3, 2.2% of last year is, let me just double check. Hang on for a second. We could raise it about, you know, $60,000. I've got some suggestions, or at least some things for the board to think about with regards to the transfer station and how we bill there. On next week's agenda at this point is a proposal to adjust the transfer station fees. It's really more of a philosophy discussion. There's been discussions in the past. I know here in most communities, frankly, should the transfer station budget be covered solely by, you know, the fees that we charge to go there? So I've run some numbers to give you a sense of what those changes would look like. Some communities use a pay-as-you-throw, which is a nasty phrase in many cases, but it's probably more fair than if you wanted to change your philosophy on trying to balance the transfer station budget on the users. It's probably a fairer way to go about doing things because you know, a smaller household means a lesser cost than a person who has a larger household, for example, and throws away more trash. But that's, again, those are all philosophical discussions you guys can have. But I've provided some information, some talking points, and some things for you guys to think about, take with you before next week. So I think there is a little bit of wiggle room on the revenue side, certainly, depending on how you want to attack the budget. But really, candidly, it's just shifting the ball from one spot to another very
It's not
honestly.
solving a long-term solution.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not.
finding a long-term solution to these
It's not.
problems.
It's
Yeah.
not.
No, I get that.
So what, just looking at this really quickly, what I was going to ask is on that BLS, could we add $100? Because that doesn't seem to put us too high. ALS, and maybe, obviously, I don't have this in Excel to see if they're all equal going across, but it almost looks like we're kind of on the higher end for that. And then ALS, add another 100, because there's still plenty that are, the ALS too, because there's still plenty that are higher. I don't know, it's just a
So-
thought.
So we're,
I just don't know if it's gonna make a difference, I just thought at least should ask.
It'd be
So I think
5%.
It's every 50 cents makes a difference, right?
Right.
And that's one of the reasons last fall, correct me if I'm wrong, we went up on ambulance rates and landed where we are. So I reached out to Ethan, my rep at Pro, and said, what do you think? He said, a tiny bit. He said, but don't push the envelope. He said, because everybody's doing it now. And what we're starting to see at the state level is the pushback from the insurance companies. If you've watched, I keep wanting to say Fox, Boston 25, they had a segment maybe 6 weeks or so ago. It was a very short one, but it was about the pushback and why isn't everybody billing the same and why is it so much and so forth. So I would hate to be adding to that attention because I think the more attention it gets, the more traction it may get. And for the few dollars that you perhaps gain in the next year or so, that may cause a lot of attention, some action at the state level that sets ambulance rates. And I will say this, if they set ambulance rates, they're not going to be the ones you're looking at on the spreadsheet. They're going to be closer to a Medicaid ambulance rate, which is a $2,400 bill that they pay you $600 for. So, again, I certainly will, as a matter of information, look into this, but I can hear in the back of my head right now Ethan's answer on the phone tomorrow. But I certainly will.
Just exploring all of our options.
Yep, absolutely.
I think it's a good idea.
One of the things that I think will be helpful, just as a side note on this topic, when you look at the amount of injuries we had 4 people in the academy. We had a lot of times where we just simply weren't physically able to run full staff last year. And as I said, that's what drove a lot of those mutual aid numbers. One of the things that will help us is to try to bring those mutual aid numbers down, because in the strictly business sense, we're giving revenue away. You know, we collect it certainly when we go to another town. They come here, they certainly collect as well. But if we can eat up some of that 127 transports with our folks and our ambulance, you know, you can multiply that times the $881. And I think, honestly, that's probably more effective than raising rates.
Makes sense.
And I don't know the answer to this, Mark, but I think it might help with the board, just to put things in perspective. I'm assuming that the majority of your ambulance calls are either ALS-1 or ALS-2.
Typically, ALS-1 is the highest percentage of ambulance calls, so that's billed. We changed it. I had the last ones memorized. You can look at what ALS-1 and 2 are now. Those are billed plus the $50 a mile. The BI is 11 miles. South Shore is much longer than that. You bill one way, you don't bill for the return. But the change in mileage was very helpful in increasing our revenue. So if we were to go up, that's probably where we would go, is the mileage.
Okay.
It's the most justifiable simply because of fuel cost and maintenance.
Right. Any other questions for the chief? No. Anything else, chief, that you
Not
want to
that
say?
my
I think
voice
you
will
did a good
endure,
job.
no.
What's that?
I said not that my voice will endure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, chief. Now another guy named Chief.
Are we timing it?
Thank you.
Thank you. It's like 110 usually.
If you can't do this, can you log onto the meeting and he wants you to project a PowerPoint presentation? I'm not sure I don't know if she can do that here.
Oh,
It looks like she is. Yeah. Yeah, she's got it. Oh, you need a quick break? Yeah, we're gonna take a, sorry, I'm joking, a 2-minute break.
recess.
I don't know if I don't ever join this meeting. This is not my selectmen, this is my own personal.
I need to get on the
We are resuming the meeting now at 6:56.
We good?
We're good.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having us here tonight. Presentation that I'm going to show you is, what time is it, Keith? I have 15 minutes.
6:56, sir.
Okay, all right, so the clock is on. I'd like to thank the three people from the department that you see here tonight. I don't speak fluent PowerPoint presentation anymore, so the guy on the cover over there, he made it, and Laura and John contributed to helping us put this together. There's a lot of things to consider here. The context of this is actually drawn from the Massachusetts Declaration of the Rights and the obligation of the government to provide protection to the people of the Commonwealth. I can dig it up for you. It's going to take me some research, but I know it's in the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And there's also the government's obligation is also to shield cities and towns from liability for providing adequate police service. I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing that this is a discussion that we've had. I may have had some conversations with some members about this as a one-time growth opportunity in the face of a potential 2.5 override. So the presentation is basically a smart growth plan, and when we use the term smart, I came up with a cool acronym. We actually got it together at the last minute today, that our goals should be specific and that the goal is concrete, tangible, and that everybody knows what it's going to look like. Kim, I know you like pictures, so this is for you. The goal has to be measurable, and the success is dependent upon that, and it has to be something that everybody can understand. The goal has to be attainable. It is challenging, as we know, based on the finances of the town at this time, but it should be achievable based on the resources available. It should be relevant. I definitely think that in the face of what I said at the last meeting of a ratio of 2 patrolmen to 1 supervisor, it is certainly relevant. It contributes to the larger overall objectives of the mission, and it's timely. The goal has a deadline or at least measurable time milestones. So you've probably heard me talk in the past about the fact that in order to get an officer hired, there's a background investigation process that can take several months, as you saw, and then there's the academy process, and then there's a field training process. So you can have anywhere from 18 to 24 months till you have fully trained police officers and boots on the ground. To describe the present condition and the where are we now of things, the total sworn personnel for the Kingston Police Department, meaning police officers, is 26. We're down to 24, with 2 of them going into the academy in the month of April. So we are budgeted for 26. We have 8 dispatches, 1 full-time admin, and there's several specialized functions in the department, including the investigative services unit, which is detectives. They're a pretty busy unit. School resource officers, traffic safety, which is a ad hoc position right now, but we're hoping to make a full-time traffic safety officer with the extra body that'll come out of the academy. Plymouth County Outreach is a very large endeavor. It's the first in the county, and it's something that Kingston is heavily involved in because Plymouth County Outreach's home office is right in Kingston. And elder services, we also oversee animal control, the animal inspector, the harbor master, and the shellfish warden. I want to clarify on the ratio of 2 patrolmen to 1 supervisor. That's just in raw form. The ratio of officers to a supervisor on the street as they feathered out on the shifts is 3 to 1. Here's your population growth from the town from 1998 to 2023. The source is the U.S. Census Data Bureau. By the way, anything that's in here that is in error, I take full accountability for it. I got other members of the department that helped us put this together collectively, but anything that's inaccurate, it's something that I'll take ownership of. You have some variables in the town to consider. Obviously, your mall, 2 shelters, you have shoreline to think about, housing, commerce, river, things of that nature. This is a very steep growth, 34.84% between 1998 and now. It's about a 22.5 degree angle there. It's not exactly 45, but to put us at about 15,000 people, to me is a statistical significance, and it's pretty steep. We thought that you'd want to take a look at some of the growth that we've had in the recent years. This is a 7-year look back, obviously, to 2018. 2020, 2021, you saw a dip in productivity here. If you're going by these numbers, obviously based on the pandemic, 2023 and 2024, the productivity and proactive policing is coming back. The total logged calls for service, that's every time we have a log entry, and it's in the neighborhood of 18,000 calls. And then the calls for service, motor vehicle stops, property checks, these are the things that generate a call for service, and we categorize them as that. So we're between 9,000 and 10,000 for the year 2024. As you saw, 2023, 2024, and 2025 will ultimately be higher than that top number over there. The business of the business is just getting busier. Comparable communities, we thought based on the previous, the next slide that you're going to see, which you probably should have put the other one first, but the next slide shows how many offices you have in some comparable communities. And what we have is we have the number of police officers per 1,000 residents. So you have a graph that you can look at. The most comparable community to us based on previous studies for collective bargaining purposes has been Pembroke. I put Abington right there, but I don't know if they've been included in previous comparables for collective bargaining or anything like that. West Bridgewater is a small community, and they were an anomaly about how many residents they have versus how many police officers per 1,000. Here's your numbers for your comparable communities. Abington is going from 23 to 34. That's 11 vacancies. But out of those 11 vacancies, that is 7 new positions that they've added to their department. 4 people are in the academy right now. They're kind of, their population is a little bit bigger. The town size is about the same. They have a civilian staff of 4 full-time administrative personnel and 6 part-timers. I put the budget numbers on here. You can read them at your will. You can call me anytime, as usual, if you would like to ask questions about these things. I'll come back to any of these slides at the end if you have any questions too, but you have a handout there that you can write questions down as you go along. Before I read this slide here, I'll just qualify this as saying that Laura and I will continue to work with Kathleen and Keith. These numbers might not be exact as to some of the exercises that we've gone through. So candidly, Keith and Kathleen might not agree with these hypotheses here, but we're committed to continue to work through anything that we have to do to get, the most specific numbers that we're going to need. The impacts of percentages proposed, 4% increase in the department's budget would result in our opinion at this point, in the layoff of 2 full-time patrol officers. A 6% increase would be 1 full-time patrol officer, 1 dispatcher. 11% would allow us to maintain level services at a cost of $500,000. That's 17 patrol officers, 8 dispatchers. And the requests that we have in, I'm not exactly sure where all of that is and how many members of the board have seen that. I know that the town administrator has these requests in draft form. We're looking for 3 patrol officers, 1 deputy chief, and 1 full-time dispatcher at a total estimated cost of $1,156,951. I did have some conversations with Keith about, ways to kind of cut money in the beginning side of that, about, what if we just did a half a year for the deputy chief the first year. Keith and I both agree that, if you did the deputy chief at 6 months funding, you'd still be kind of catching up the following fiscal year. So any cuts like that would make, it'd be something that we'd be willing to work with the board on if the board is amenable to any of this, again, in the face of a 2.5 override. But it would be less sustainable, any of those positions that were funded at a half a year or whatever. Something else to consider is that when we put in for funding for an FTE, we based that on July 1. But we always have that variable of when does the police academy start? How long is the process going to take? Could there end up being turned back money on some of these things at the end of the fiscal year? And the answer to that, of course, would be yes, if we end up funding something beginning in July, but not sending them to the academy until November. All the things that we do are based on the availability of the academies and their regional. So, I mean, you got Plymouth, you got Randolph, you got one down the Cape, you got West Boylston, you got them all over the place. But it's all a question of state funding and the availability of an academy. This is an anecdotal analysis of, I think, where we should be. A total sworn personnel of 33. So again, if we were to have some growth at the beginning of fiscal '26 with 3 patrol officers, a deputy, and a dispatcher, you don't count the dispatcher towards sworn personnel for this equation. I think that over a 3 to 4 year period following this fiscal year, if these positions are requested are funded, an attainable goal should be 33 sworn personnel. Some things to consider for the board. A lot of these discussions would take place behind closed doors in executive session for purposes of collective bargaining strategy. But the town is a very far cry from being in a position to establish minimum staffing levels for the police department. When you have a ratio of 2 to 1, we're not even close. So if we ever had that as a standard, so we know that this shift, the afternoon shift, 4 p.m. to midnight, should have a minimum of 3 to 1 at all times, with an allowance of maybe 2 people to take the day off. You know, we'd be able to take a look at the measurement of overtime and how much of we spend on backfill for vacations and stuff like that. The town is nowhere even close to that. The substantial growth, again, I think everybody gets the point that we're hoping to do that if there is in fact an override. I think the board knows, based on the last meeting, that we've requested the Silver Lake Regional fund 1 full-time SRO, or at least 80% of the funding for that at the middle school. Their next meeting is February 25th, if I got that right. Keith, you recall if that's right?
I believe that is.
So we're going to be there. We're going to make the case that, it's time. The work is there. It's definitely needed. So in terms of growth, I know it's all mostly Kingston money. There would be obviously contributions from schools within the regional towards that 80%. This side of the government would be on the hook for 0.2 plus benefits if the school did fund a full-time SRO at the middle. I mean, what we're dealing with here, I'm not here to assign blame. I'm just describing the present condition. There's 100 cooks in the kitchen. It is where it is, and we are where we are, but we are, in fact, catching up. This job has changed a lot. There's a lot of things that have to happen just to get into the job. I, for one, and I know the members of the command staff and the officers that do the background checks, don't want to make the 30-year mistake of having the wrong person come in. So it's for that reason that when we do a background check on our future employees, we do a deep dive. We want to make sure that we know everything we need to know. It includes social media. Log on to your account. Let me see what you got. We want to make sure that we're not having somebody in that said something that they shouldn't have said, when they were a sophomore in college, or did something to invoke the civil rights penalty enhancement for different crimes that come up when you are attacking somebody for free speech. And I say these things as examples of things that I dealt with in my former life. So we take the incoming employees very seriously, and it's an arduous process if you do it and you're doing it right. Subsequent requests will be 1 FTE per year, subject to funding and the support of this board and the Finance Committee. Additional community variables, obviously we talked about the population spike, the call volume increase, the time for boots on the ground. There's no certain future about the shelters, despite the things that the governor is saying at this point in time. They're really not committing that the shelters are gone, but what happens to the people that are in them now? We don't know what's going to happen with that. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's been a lot of talk about what the future holds for the mall, the effect of water, more water coming into this community. So there's a lot of variables to consider. There's some unforeseen costs. We haven't budgeted for them in fiscal '26. The education incentive benefit in the contract, and there's some members of the department right now that are going for their degrees. Should they graduate within this fiscal year, and I think we have at least one who may, there's now a financial incentive for that we've not budgeted for. if the future holds us looking at more cost effectiveness for the body-worn cameras, they're good until 2029, right? We pay for cloud storage. If the town wants to spend the money for our infrastructure and invest in a large storage capacity server for that, we don't pay for the storage. We pay on the front end. If a server for the station goes down, we've already had that happen once for 911, and it was an unfunded liability we were on the hook to replace. But if a server for the station goes down, the servers, they run IMC, which is our in-house records database, vector scheduling, which is something that we use for scheduling as well as training, filling details, all sorts of stuff. Power DMS is funded by our membership with Mass Police Accreditation Commission. Even though we're not accredited, we still pay membership, and Power DMS comes with it so that we can keep track of who's signed off on what policy, who's been trained, et cetera, et cetera. But we still need the storage in our in-house. And some of these things are coming to the end of their life. That includes the desktops and some of the report writing areas. Definitely the desktops that are running dispatch. MDT laptops, these are the things that we have not budgeted for that could go at any given time. So it's an unpredicted variable. We do have one person who's out injured right now. It's probably 3 months before that employee's return to work. Another unpredictable variable is it's difficult political times out there. You get people that want to exercise their right of revolution. So that's going to increase in the likelihood of uses of force. When a use of force incident occurs, there's a likelihood of an injury to a member of the department. So these things are unpredictable. It's been pretty good, okay, but you just don't know when something's going to happen. So, what time is it? Am I under 15 minutes? No, sir. How many? All right. Well, I came close.
You get a bite.
Okay. Well, I'm done. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, I know this is a big ask. We are catching up, and this is a lot to unpack.
So I have a quick question. Going back to the impacts of percentages proposed, I'm not sure if there's a typo in here, but I want to get an idea of kind of where we are at each percentage. So 4%, which we're not even considering, we're at 6% right
Yep.
now with the TA's recommended budget. So with the 6%, you're looking at laying off a full-time patrol officer and one dispatcher, correct?
Is that an
Yes.
existing position, not a new proposed position? So we would go from 26 to 25,
Yeah, that's what it sounds
and
like.
then 8 to 7, is what you're saying?
Okay, so that's helpful. And then the next one, it says 11%, but then it says 17 patrol, 8 dispatchers. Should that be 26 patrol or 27?
Supervisors.
What?
That's just patrol, that's the patrol unit, and we have other sergeants or different.
Oh, see, yeah, I had
But
I
11% is level services.
Level service.
level, I got
Yes.
it. Now I understand. Thank you. That makes more sense.
Can I just add one, just for clarification?
Yeah.
The 500,000 is in addition to the 6% increase, correct?
No, it's based on where I am, the 4.6 million, I
She
think
had to keep talking from there, because they're gonna get under. No one else can hear.
We may need you to go up to the, yeah, thank you.
While you're there, can I ask a question? On the calls for service total logged events, the 23% increase over the prior year, do we have an idea on why it increased so significantly? If you can,
I recall giving a number to the chairman about a certain number of calls at a certain location in the south end of town, and I thought you
okay,
gave me a number about 273 for the calendar year,
nope, we're getting more backups. Okay.
460, yes.
I just
There are
want-
hotspots that are affecting these numbers.
I was just curious, because it is a significant increase, so just.
Yeah, so on that page you're referring to, the right side chart is we're called for a 911, we're called the business line, whatever it may be, right?
6% increase in 2024 and 10% over the
prior.
previous year for 2023.
Correct. You know, the location that the chief was just referring to is, one point I ran a year's worth of data and we had 360 calls at that one location, almost a call a day, right? So, on the left side chart, that is all officer-initiated type things as well. So that includes motor vehicle stops, property checks, things like that. So that's just, to some degree, the 2024 increase on the left-hand side is cops getting out there doing their jobs more than maybe a couple years prior. The 6% and 10% on the right-hand side is just an increase in calls. Also, it could be argued that as our increase in calls continue to occur, officers have less free time to do proactive policing, things like motor vehicle stops for speed and things like that, so that you'll start to see, if we continue to see the right side chart increase incrementally, the amount of, with less officers, the amount of time they have free, then the officer-initiated things like motor vehicle stops for traffic violations, things like that start to go back down.
Makes
If
sense.
that makes sense.
Thank you.
Want to speak on Eric's question?
Yes, I'll go back to Eric's question. Okay, so the figure of the $500,000 to get to a level services, that's based on going back to the current budget of $4.6 million. So I would need,
So it's 210,775?
I need almost another $250,000 to get us to level services so we do not have to lay off anybody.
Now I'm more confused.
So what I did was I took the TA's budget,
Yeah.
which was the 5.193. I added the 504. Is that right?
So what we have in the department request, the 6.186.
That is our wish list of adding.
Got it. That's not
that's
level
the 20
services.
No, that's not
Got it.
level
Okay,
services. That is
that's-
adding staff.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. That's helpful. So I was like, this doesn't make sense. Okay.
So another 211,000 will keep their
Existing staff
patrolman and
levels.
dispatcher.
Correct.
So, what it looks like right now, if we went back to what I was talking about in terms of overrides, if they have 6%, they're laying off, we're cutting back services. If we add $210,000 to this budget, either finding it from another department, or an override, or new quotas on number of tickets per day from people coming in from Pembroke, Plymouth, Duxbury. That's a joke, he's shaking his head no.
They're
It's
all
a joke.
shaking their heads.
Right? Please don't toilet paper my house, I'm just joking.
We have more questions too, probably.
Probably. So, yeah, and anybody have any questions?
I wanted to ask
Continue.
Keith too. When you were sort of working with Chief Holmes and trying to find something closer to the 4%, I guess it's not always clear when we look at the budget because we don't have the ability to change the column width, so you can't necessarily see what these items are. I guess your proposal included laying off staff.
It did, so I, as with the fire department, I went back to Chief Holmes, said, I know we can't make it to the 4% because of the situation that the police department, is dealing with as far as staffing levels and things of that nature, so can we get closer to 6? And allowed the police department in this case to determine the appropriate levels of funding based on this overall 6% increase.
Got it, that makes sense. I have more questions, but you guys probably have questions too.
Go ahead, I'm just doing some math real quick.
In terms of the comparable communities, how do you determine what the comparable communities are? Like, what are you looking at exactly to make this?
So that was, it was basically a hodgepodge of chiefs that I knew nearby, communities that were kind of similar. I mean, there's an anomaly in here where you have Wareham. I mean, that is a huge department compared to us. I just thought that I'd give you a sample of some of the communities that are near to us, and that may be similar in some of their attributes. Like, again, Abington is very similar in its community size. They also have a new police chief I used to work with, so I got his numbers really easily. Holbrook, I'm kind of, like, that to me is that's a smaller department, smaller land area, and they have the same number as us. 2 motorcycles, K-9 unit, 1 full-time admin, but their annual budget's $3.8 million. So, I mean, I don't know how they do the actual, the whole working out of the numbers, what gets filled for over, I don't know what they do exactly. I'm just giving numbers of what their numbers were at the end of the fiscal year and what their numbers are going into fiscal '26. Pembroke is the most similar. It was used in the labor relations comparables. West and East Bridgewater, they're on my ride home. I called them because they're not that dissimilar. I was gonna look at Bridgewater, it was too big. You know, there's so many other variables in the town, including the college. Carver right next door. Hanover was the one that surprised me. I didn't realize that they're a bigger community than us. There's 16,000, 19 square miles, and the civilian staff is off the hook. Five full-timers and 6 part-timers, and 30 full-timers and 1.
So the reason I asked is we did a wage study recently where we had comparable communities, and I didn't put them side by side with this list, but I know they were trying to find communities similar to ours, similar size, so if these are on that list, it would be helpful because it would align.
Chief Holmes and I had a conversation about that probably 2 or 3 weeks ago and just suggested maybe he look at that. And I think it makes a lot of sense to then refine that list based on, you know, square mileage and things of that nature that they have to, they have to patrol. So, so he was aware. I think there's some of those communities are on there. But I think he took that information and massaged it to
Sure.
to address specifically police departments.
I think the Lieutenant and Laura both just told me, just about all these were on there. I don't think Wareham was, I'm not sure Holbrook was, but these other communities were on that last study.
For the long-term planning, looking at the where we should be, going from 26 to 33, correct? So there are other impacts that we should be thinking about as well as we think toward the long-term plan of the department, including the building and whether you have space for said humans. Also capital, so we need to think about vehicles for these folks. I don't know that that's in a capital plan, but it should be something that we're thinking about, should be part of this, maybe not this particular conversation, but I think now is a good time to have that conversation. It's not just staffing and benefits. I do know that adding staff obviously would likely reduce overtime, yes?
Actually, no, not
Oh,
until
doesn't?
It's
Okay.
subject to collective bargaining, but once you negotiate in minimum staffing, when you get to that level, then you can actually have an impact on some of the overtime.
Okay,
Not a lot. It's not gonna save the money you'd think.
okay.
I got that
Helpful to
question
know.
30 days into the job too, by the way, from the chairman of the finance committee, who's not here tonight.
Well, Carl and I are often on the same page.
But going back to capital, I did revise my request from 3 cruisers to 4, because we actually need that many. After some consideration of the capital planning committee's meeting, it was originally 3. Looking at the fleet, it should be 4.
Okay,
And just, if I could just expand upon that, so historically, it's been 2. Because Chief Holmes has proposed or requested some additional patrol staffing, the original CIP increased that number to 3, and then again, after some additional consideration, it's been now bumped to 4. So some of those have been, the vehicle issue, I think, has been addressed at some point. Once there's a clear direction on where the board wants to go and how they want to fund, what they want to fund, if anything, you know, that those things can be refined, but they have been addressed to some degree in CIP already.
last question, I hope. Is there a way to get closer to 6% without laying off staff?
No, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's okay if the answer is no, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask. There's a
I
lot of, like I
understand.
said, there's a lot of lines on here, and we only
Yep.
see the first 5 or 6 letters of each line, so I don't really know what each of these are, and I know Finance Committee will do a deep dive, but worth asking the question.
Like I said, I haven't been brought here to assign blame. I'm defining the present condition and where I think we need to go. 6%, it's going to be catastrophic. I mean, you got to look at the growth of the department has been absent. You got to look at the fact that we are operating at a skeleton crew and have been since the last time I think there was growth was 1997. Again, this is some stuff that I'm being told. I haven't seen the papers myself. The COPS grant, and when it was expired at the 3rd year, after the 3rd year, the position was attrition, somebody retired or left, and there was no replacement of that person.
Thank you.
So here's a question that kind of builds on your question, Kim. and this is probably more for Keith, and I'm not expecting an answer, but just something to think about as we go into next week. From my perspective, I would really like to see our budget under the override without losing people at the 6%. So basically get to the 11%. What that means is finding $211,000 somewhere else in our budget from other areas without really hurting services. I know we talked about doing this before, about closing the library. Are there other things that we can do to grab back $211,000 from other areas?
Before you get hate mail, when you say closing the library, you mean on specific days or reducing hours and things, you didn't mean actually closing the library?
No, not closing the library. No, and
You'll
what
get
I'm-
hate mail, so I just
Yeah,
want to make
and I
sure.
know you were talking to the highway department about potentially not staying up as late, of staying open as late, staying up as late, and then
I will,
brush
so what
handling and
what I'm
whatnot.
happy to do is include in the board's material for Tuesday night, coming up with, or proposing some additional adjustments. I frankly don't know how that doesn't include staff somewhere. But I'm happy, so just to be clear, from my point of view, there's an additional roughly $221,000, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the number we're talking about for the
I had
police?
211, but I might be
211, all
wrong.
right. I was trying to read over your shoulder, so
Yeah.
I apologize. Are we addressing anything with regards to the reduction in overtime, sick leave, for the fire department as well? What I'm trying to get to very candidly, and I don't know if you guys have a number tonight, is what is the number you need me to try to find? I can do some of it, I think, through bumping up some of our estimated revenues, but again, it gets us to where we want to be to some degree here, right? But now I end up impacting my free cash and my ability to fund the capital program, because that's how we fund the capital program. So I'm trying to balance, but I would rather underpromise and overdeliver than vice
Right.
versa, so to speak. But, so I just would like the board to decide if they can, or provide an example, or how close can what else can I find other than $211,000 that would address some of the needs of the fire department? sick
So
leave.
I think from my point of view, and I'm just one person, so y'all chime in, again, just based on Mark's statements about this, that they can make it work. I think the 211,000 is a higher priority, and then secondarily, try to find some of the sick time, overtime, whatever, for the fire department after the fact. And I'm not choosing police over fire, Mark. You actually are. But you said that, I know what you're saying, but like,
When you don't,
oh,
Sorry.
This isn't going to be battle, but it's
No.
factual. When you choose not to staff one fully and to staff one fully, that's where you
You're
are.
choosing one over the other.
I'm trying to avoid layoffs. That's
Right, I get it.
what I'm trying to
I get it, but
avoid.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it is what it is, that's all.
And what was the total number that we needed for fire?
I think that one was 211.
Yeah, roughly.
Does that sound right, Mark? That 211?
177?
177.
Okay.
Let me see what I can do. I understand where the board's trying to get to.
Yeah.
Let me try to get creative. I'll work with both chiefs and all the other department heads and see what we can pull together.
Right.
Realistically, does it have to be the full 177? Probably not. We could probably really put our heads together and try to figure out something that lands us, whether it's during the day we didn't fill a sick day. There's options there.
Yeah.
Again, don't have a crystal ball, so
Right.
we can
Right.
just do the best we can, I think, to Keith's point.
Yeah, okay.
So I think this gets back to what you were getting to at the beginning of the meeting, though, and a little bit about Chief Holmes talking about the plan for the future and potentially using the potential for a Prop 2.5 override to try to better fill the needs of the police department is, I think we're looking at it in two different ways. One is, we're trying to get in under the levy limit, which is what we and Finance Committee said we were going to try to do.
Right.
If we have to pursue an override, because we need to, the schools need to, whatever, then we need to be looking at it, I think what you said, in the different levels, because we
Right.
can't, we don't want to risk failing.
Right.
So if we support that, even if some of us don't.
Right.
If we decide that the voters should have the opportunity to vote on it, then we
Then
need
we
to
have
have a
different numbers. But, you know, in
plan.
the end, I mean, even if we came up with a couple tiers, somebody could still come in and make an amendment to any
Sure.
part of it.
Sure.
Even a portion of it. But I still think it would be better to have sort of that menu item of the different levels available at town meeting. So if we do that, are we looking at, and the schools are their own thing. So the school committees will come up with their budget and whatnot. So we're really talking more specifically about fire and police. I think we need to be fully funding, not cutting, not laying anybody off. That's first priority, obviously. Then, we're looking at 3 new patrol, a deputy chief, and a new dispatcher. And the chief had said, I mean, if we do have an override, and we split those up into different tiers or priorities, you know, one of the things that the chief had mentioned a couple months ago is, hey, if we're doing an override, do this one time, and then that's it. Although we were talking about adding additional patrol, 1 per year, to get up to 33 eventually.
Right, but doesn't that, I know it's not exactly, and we're crystal balling it, but
Right.
adding patrol, it's a one-time, but then next year, are they gonna be coming in at 12% instead of 11%? And
So my understanding,
that-
if I could, just to try to respond to that, my understanding is once you pass an override, unless you rescind that override
Right,
can.
you'd have to
It's
pass
still
an
there.
underride if you,
Right.
if you wanted to bring the taxes back down, but you've
No.
got 2.5 over that.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
Or you have more excess levy capacity. Sorry, I was just
Right.
saying it to the microphone for all those that.
yeah. So, you know, if we do that override for all these positions in 1 year,
then it's a
then you're not
one-time.
coming back and doing it. But if,
Yeah.
let's say we pull out the deputy chief and the dispatcher, only did 3 patrol, well, he still wants the deputy chief and another dispatcher, that in the future, are we gonna have enough in our
Right.
budget? We're not gonna have that kind of room in our budget again, unless the mall takes off and the money is flowing in, you know, by the truckload, which I don't see. So we have to make, we don't have to make a decision tonight, but one of the things I think we should be doing is asking the chief, of those 4 positions, if you had to break them up along the lines that I was talking about in terms of priority or tiers, what's the most important to you? Like, how would you break these up?
Cops on the streets, priority.
Yep,
I could live with a half-year funding for the deputy chief. The dispatcher would fill the 2 open shifts on the midnight shift. There's only 1 dispatcher on the 2 days off that flow within the rotation of the second dispatcher on the midnight shift. So the next question is, what chief do you want to do with those extra 2 days that the dispatcher is now working? Well, there's a need for somebody that you'd almost have it like a half of a part-time admin person. You can do a lot of different things. CEDA's compliance, all the compliance with state 911, training compliance, scheduling, supervision of dispatchers, public records requests, assistance with firearms licensing. So, in that order, the cops on the streets are priority. The deputy chief is part of a succession plan. I could live with a half-a-year funding. And the dispatcher, that is the 3rd priority, but I mean, it's tough to let go of it because, I mean, it feels like to folks that have lived here, worked here, volunteered here, like this is everything at once. This is only about halfway of everything at once.
I'm going to be a broken record, but also say that when we think about these budgets, we're not just thinking about this year, we're thinking about next year, too. So we have to keep that in mind as we make these decisions.
right. Any other questions, comments? Chief, anything else that you want to let us know?
I don't want to step on your authority or your prerogative or anything, other than to say that, I mean, the override is going to happen with the way that things are going with the schools. I don't see any way out of it. This is your town to run. I'm an employee. I work for you. But, I mean, I would do my calculations if I was sitting where you are based on the assumption that that's going to happen. I feel your frustration. I actually sent Keith a text the other night telling him, well said, because he said something that needed to be said. And it wasn't easy. And I know that you echoed some of that, as did Tyler, that, you know, I mean, there's a number. They could work off of a draft number, and then you'd be able to plan going forward. It's just that they haven't given you that number. So
Right.
you have this side of the government that's affected by that on what we're planning, so.
Well, and again, it's our job to give them a number.
I couldn't agree with you more. I appreciate you having this conversation again. It's not a small request, and just trying to be the guy that delivers the message objectively and with the backup information I figured you'd want. If there's anything else you want, let me know.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is the town meeting just approved the MBTA zoning, which is an additional 500 and something apartments. The amount, so town meeting approved it. Allows for it,
yeah.
right. Rather than voting it down like a lot of local communities did. And one of the arguments was, this is going to be an increase on our services, our police, our fire, and our schools. Now granted, the whatever it is, the 280 that are there now, there's only 34 students, if those numbers
The
are
apartments?
accurate. The apartments, correct, yeah. The apartments, there's 280, and there's 34 students if those numbers are correct. Which is actually lower than I thought it would be, but obviously double that if you're, well, triple that number if the apartments are gonna triple in size. So, and police and fire have already been pretty busy up there at the apartments as well as at the Baymont. So, you know, the town had okayed all these additional housing units that could be built, not this coming year, but it could be built in a couple of years if that moved forward. And the increase and the load on our service, on our town services would clearly go up. So we need to keep in mind that, and that's one of the things that we said. I know I heard at least one person say that it better be willing to fund the schools and police and fire if we approve this, and it was approved, so. I don't have any other questions. Chief, thank you, and thank you to everybody who helped put together the PowerPoint. Thank you. And Chief Douglas, thank you for all the information as well. Always helpful. Any other, Keith, do you have any other comments? Or?
I don't. I want, if you'd like me to, I can hand out, again, the analysis we've done on the transfer station. It would provide, again, it would provide some funding availability for whatever the board decided to fund.
Yeah.
It's just meaning, frankly, that the cost for somebody to buy a transfer station decal is going up.
Okay.
So, yeah, I can hand that out tonight. You guys can take a look at it. We can talk about it more. You know, what it means right now is that, right now, the transfer station is costing the town a little over $200,000 a year to operate. That is basically their fiscal '26 budget, less the anticipated, or the revenues that we've received based on the permits for the last year. If the board wanted to modify the amount of the permits that are, the permit fees that are charged, to try to make that department self-funding, obviously, you would need to increase the fees. I've tried to keep the fees for the senior citizens the same, and have increased the fee amount for the individual purchasing the first decal. It's significant, you know, it certainly is, there's no question about that. A lot of communities do the pay-as-you-throw, which is, would be something very similar without having to buy the bags. Again, we can argue that whether or not it's equitable or not to those who are using the transfer station. But again, there's an opportunity there to free up $200,000+ to be reallocated someplace else if that's what the board wanted to do. So we will, when I say we, the senior staff team will sit down again this week, and with the help of Kathleen and everybody else, we'll try to figure out how to identify some funding that we can reallocate to police and fire without significantly impacting the services that, and the employment of other departments. If anybody has any suggestions at all that you'd like us to consider, that we can provide in the board materials for next Tuesday evening, we'd be happy to do that.
So just as feedback, I mean, I see these, I have actually curbside service, and then we got a decal for taking excess junk to the transfer station anyways, but I will tell you that our curbside pickup has gone up probably 60% in the past 4 years. It's gone up through the roof, and our, I don't remember the last time we raised the rates on the decals here. I can't remember.
We raised the rates on the decals last year by about $20.
Yeah.
And again,
And we didn't the year before.
right, and we, in talking to Sean over at Streets, Trees and Parks, we sat down last week and talked about, bumping up the nominal amount we normally do. It's tentatively on the agenda for next week. And again, just trying to get creative in how we can try to find a way to raise some funds. This is an option, right? So what I was trying to do in this exercise was figure out how much more money would it cost a decal holder to have to fully fund the operation of the transfer station. This at the, and I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize. The $300+ for a permit. $350 is certainly a pretty significant bump from the current fee. But to your point, Mr. Chair, it's still well below what it would cost somebody if they wanted to have curbside pickup.
It's about half.
So, again, I tried to be more sensitive to the 65 and older group by not bumping theirs up at all, understanding the challenges they're facing, and right, wrong, or indifferent, place the majority of the increase on users of the transfer station that are younger than 65 years old. So, you've got that information you can debate, discuss, and think about. And we will bring back some additional opportunities to transfer monies around and find ways to try to meet the needs of the police and fire department.
So this will increase $230,000, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, I apologize. I know there's extra copies. I didn't keep one for myself, so I
that's okay.
apologize. But it would increase
But that's what it looks
fees
like.
it would increase fees. So
Yeah.
right now, it's costing the taxpayers almost $257,000 to operate the transfer stations when you take the budget amount less the revenue we receive.
Yeah.
By increasing the fees, as I've identified on the right-hand side of the paper, you're increasing the revenues.
You also decreased the budget by about $30,000.
I did. So
All right.
included in that budget is a reduction of the number of times we're brush chipping. We're proposing not to be open on the extra 3 hours on Monday night. So that's what the reduction in the budgets are. The revenues are revenues that we're already collecting. We get money back for a couple of different items that are recycled. And frankly, what this doesn't do, which pay-as-you-throw does do, and I'm not advocating for pay-as-you-throw. So after they come after they toilet paper your house for the library, I don't want paper towel in my house for the transfer
Yeah,
station. But
I'll be doing it too. I hate that. Pay as you throw.
the pay-as-you-throw situation, what it does is it incents people to recycle more. So you're not throwing your bottles, your cans, your cardboard, things of that nature in a trash bucket. You're putting it in a recycling bucket. So ideally, you're not buying as many bags. That's the goal of that. It works. Right. It's not that much different than what you're doing now. It's just different, and people don't like different. So I get it, and I respect it. I've done both.
Single use would go a long way, single use recycling.
Single stream?
Because people
No
don't
question.
like dividing
I
450 things
completely
up.
agree, and I think that would increase recycling as well, because the easier you make it, the more apt people are going to do it, right? So you might reduce some of the revenues that you're receiving now, but again, what you're going to try to do ideally is incent somebody to recycle the bottles, the cans, the cardboard, all in one spot, and so they don't have to bring, 4 different containers to the transfer station.
Which
getting rid
is
of all
what we
the
do,
stuff.
like with our curbside pickup, we have that, so I just have a recycling bin that we put everything
Yep.
in, and then our garbage, and then I still have the sticker. So
And that-
but it's $700 a year for the curbside pickup now, and it used to be like $350.
And as a, I guess, to me, nominal, I know it's not nominal to everyone, but, I mean, you can fund this entire budget if you raised, between $10, $20 per senior and veteran decals. Because that would,
Even like $5 or something, so that it's.
well, that
not
would bring it
gonna break
up
the
to, it would bring it up to the 800,000 that you need. Because it's about, based on the permits issued.
So I
Well, no,
need,
It's about-
I need 700, I need 700, and on the budget that I
Oh,
presented,
sorry.
I need $750,000.
Oh, okay, sorry. Then, yeah.
So I've identified
Yeah.
just over that amount of revenue to, and again, there's no magic to how I propose the permit fees. I frankly try to take, I tried not to impact people 62 and over, or veterans. So, again, that's
Yeah,
one
so
way
you're
to do it.
already over with the proposed.
Yep.
Sorry. I was looking at the top.
No,
line.
it's fine.
The budget we're looking at in the budget book does
Is-
not include this
Is
being
it's-
self-sustained.
No.
Correct, okay.
Right now, again, for the calendar year, for the last calendar year, we have raised about $530,000 in revenue. That's the information on the current fees.
Yep.
And the budget that was proposed by the department, less the current revenues, is about $787,000. So that's the $256,000 difference, right?
Yep.
So I've reduced the budget, I recommended reducing the budget with the suggestions from Sean, and looked at bumping up the regular and second decals, as well as the replacement decal, the one-day permits and the recycling only decals that we sell for those who are just going to recycle, to try to get to a balanced budget. But, you can do it, you can assign fees any way you prefer to get to the revenue number you're looking for.
But this change solves
so
80% of the fire and police.
This change provides about 260.
70%.
We need
260.
380. We need 380,000.
Yeah, and that's 250,
Yeah,
260. So it's like, whatever, 70,
Yeah.
65%, 70%.
Yeah.
That's if,
But I mean, that's
But-
a significant
Yeah.
That's
help.
but
So I'm gonna
going
put
from
the- so-
240 to 350 for a sticker is gonna.
and it really would be $430 if you buy a household sticker.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if you buy a sticker and your second sticker is
We
now
just need to
$80,
borrow the truck.
but then you
Just
won't make
use
that
one.
revenue.
No, but like, what are other communities sitting at? I
Right.
mean, I'm pretty sure we're low. I don't know if we're low compared to everyone.
So I can try to gather information from area communities. I'm not really sure. I think we can use just the communities maybe that either abut Kingston or are 2 communities away. I don't know that we need to use the same communities that were used in the wage survey. I don't think that'd be necessary in this case, but I can try to pull all that information together. It should not be hard to get. Again, it's really dependent on the philosophy of the community. What are they trying to achieve? But I will get as much information as I can. I'll provide the board with a menu of additional revenues and/or cost savings to get as close to the funding needed to restore to public safety. I just, the exercise has been done. I think later this week, like I said, we'll get some revenues from the state that will not be final, but they'll move less than probably 0.5%.
Yeah.
So I'm confident that whatever the governor's budget shows for revenues We'll come in at awfully close to what those are. We'll take a look at potentially where we are with the ambulance billing and see if we can bump that a little bit. Again, I know some people look at free cash and say, why do we have so much free cash? But it's primarily because we don't spend any capital money on anything but free cash. So I think the community has always budgeted conservatively, knowing that there's a need for that free cash. And as we chip away at being less and less conservative with our revenue estimates, we still might meet, we still will, I assume we'll still meet the revenue thresholds we assign. It's just going to impact the back end of the budget, which has been capital needs. So,
I think the biggest goal is if we can get fire taken care of and police taken care of in terms of level service, still getting the overtime, the sick time, not reducing any staff without an override. And then for an override, we're not even considering, at that point, fire's budget is set. It's just police and then maybe schools.
And
Maybe.
it's a great goal, and I'm happy to, everybody in this room is happy to try to find that, and I'm confident we will. That's 46% of the puzzle. So I'm not trying to be,
Yes.
I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer at the end of the meeting.
Right.
But, and I think it's been said already, but, you've got another large department that, so at some point, I think the Board of Selectmen has to make a decision, because it is your money. It's your bottom line decision, it's not the school department's. They can ask for whatever they want. It's the Selectmen's budget, Selectmen's recommendation that goes on the warrant. So, at some point, I think a decision, I don't know that the Board of Selectmen should wait until March or April when you get the school budget, which is where it looks like it's going, to have to have a real good feel that you're going to be able to educate the community on why an override of whatever the number is going to be can be successful. All the homework I've done on overrides in the last 3 months has been, you got to get that number early, you got to get it to the people, and you got to justify it. I think we saw it with MBTA zoning. I think we've seen it with other budget items in the past. Information is pretty powerful to have, and to wait another 45 to 60 days.
Well, I think we
really
can
puts-
watch their public hearings, which
Yep.
are coming up the first week of February, and then they're gonna meet and discuss it, and they're gonna talk about what, they may not vote, but we're gonna hear them talking and discussing and what cuts are available. We can always put placeholders together, and we could always say, okay, override, tier A, tier B, these are our numbers. They can be what's the deadline that we have to have the warrant?
I don't have it in front of me, I apologize.
think
It's in
how many
April,
weeks
it's,
before?
It's in the beginning of our
it's,
books.
End of March?
Yeah,
I've got it, I do have it, hang on, please hold.
I took that sheet out.
No, I got it right here someplace, Eric, I apologize, I have it right in front of
I
me.
have questions about other budgets too, whenever.
Yeah,
I have the same topic.
I was gonna ask you. Well, don't worry about it.
March
Oh,
25th, we close the warrant. Now, that date is not hard and fast, that
Right.
can be pushed.
So I think we could put a number together in the month of February. I think that should be the goal, have our number, whatever it is in there, if it needs to change. But we're gonna know probably within the first week of February, because the state aid's coming out this week, should be fine-tuned by the beginning of February, although sometimes they're later. And then we can move from there. Before we close out tonight, though, Kim, you have other questions about other parts?
I do, I don't.
I just had one thing for this, and this is just my personal opinion, but
Yep.
for when we meet, what is Tuesday? Guess we meet every week now.
We didn't meet for 3 weeks,
Yeah.
So that was sort of evening out.
Personally, I would like to see us try to get to these level services through additional revenues prior to cuts. Like, me as a citizen, I would rather pay $350 a month than see us lose staff.
Not a month.
A year, sorry. Sorry,
That's a lot
that's
of
a really
increase.
high dump sticker. I would not use that anymore. At least I want to see that as an option, is how can our revenues solve this, as opposed to us saying, like Eric Crone said, cutting library instead. No, I'm just, and obviously that was just
Eric Crone
an
said
example.
police quotas and tickets. That's what Eric Crone said.
But no, yeah, that's
Absolutely. And if
I would
anybody
like
ha-
to see revenue changes before.
And if anybody has any suggestions
Yeah.
at all, again, nothing's off the table, so let us know, we can tell you why that makes sense or why we think it may not, but the more heads we can put together to try to solve this problem, the better off we'll be. So if you have any thoughts, I'm all ears.
Do you want other people to go first?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how late we want to go, so next
We're
week.
gonna go through the questions. That's what we're gonna do.
I know, but we're also doing some of this next week, so
just vote
by all
on this
means, yeah, just start wherever you want to start.
All right, accounting?
Yes.
Question. So the clerical, so 51113, clerical union, looks like in 2025 was 53, and in 2026 is 116?
Yeah, so we're shifting, you'll see a corresponding reduction in the collector budget. We're shifting payroll, responsibility of payroll under the finance director rather than having it under the collector treasurer.
Got it, that makes sense.
Don't
That was my only
leave,
question.
don't leave,
I made you
don't,
walk over there all by,
trust me, she'll have to answer questions.
okay. It was under the treasurer before?
Treasurer collector, I apologize, maybe Kathleen remembers, I think it was under, listen, I
Either
told you
way.
not to leave. It was under the treasurer.
Okay,
I-
that's fine. Let's see, what's this one? Board of Health,
Yes.
also clerical union, it looks like it went from 47 to 78?
Is that the nurse?
Yes.
So the,
Okay. Just curious, 'cause
so let
that's a-
me
okay,
verify, but
that's fine.
I feel very confident it's the nurse, but I will verify and provide.
Just, for some reason, I thought
Yep.
that was hired before, so I guess I'm curious about the, drastic increase.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine.
Was it because it was a down? Was it because it was a down period? Because wasn't there
Well, we had
we had
a,
someone come on and then they immediately left and then
Yeah,
we
but it
had
was
there was a grant,
approved
so
in
we
the
have
budget for
a,
47,
Okay, yeah,
and
I
then
guess what-
proposed for 78, just-
we've been working with a grant, a nurse that is provided
Okay.
through a grant, and let me just verify that, and I'll be happy to, and all I'll do is I'll respond in writing so we can keep a track of all the answers,
Sorry.
questions.
should
Oh, I
have
think it's
emailed
great.
you the
No, it's
questions.
fine. It's absolutely fine.
For Community Preservation Committee, what is the $11,775 in office supplies?
So that's great questions, and the well-informed admin who supports the CPC committee and I discussed that last week, and what that is it's budgeted for and it comes out of the CPC funding for items that the CPC may need to spend money on. It has been drastically less expended over the last few years than the $11,000 budget. I think that $11,000 budget has been in place now for at least the last 3 years.
Okay, I do see
but
it in
it's-
25, with the
it's-
actual being 1,800.
Yeah, it's money that's come out of, or allocated from the CPC funds. There is no quote-unquote, if we reduce that, I've got to reduce the revenue. So there's an offset.
Okay, okay,
But we are looking at doing that anyways, because frankly, it probably is higher than it needs to be.
okay.
We're having a conversation right now with our CPC chair about a couple of things.
For Council on Aging,
Yes.
I know we get reimbursed for
Yes, I've
some
got
of
that right
that
here.
costs.
Yep.
That cost there? Do you know how much we get back? It goes to the general fund, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have estimated revenues of just over $100,000. In
Interesting.
fiscal '26, it's 103. We haven't received all of fiscal '25's yet, but to date, we've received just under 60,000, and we received almost 106,000 in fiscal '24. And I've got this all, beautiful spreadsheet created by our incredibly capable finance director. For anybody who wants copies, there are copies there for you.
So while we're talking about unpopular ideas, we have $235,000 in wage and personnel. We have clerical union of $56,000. We have labor union of $94,000 and overtime of $500. This is an area where we've added staff fairly recently over the last, I don't know,
I'm
5
sorry,
years.
can you just,
Council on Aging.
oh, COA.
They're, yeah, it's a significant amount.
Okay.
It's a department where we've grown. So I guess this is an area where I would maybe want to look again at potential opportunities, given that we only get 100,000 back. And it's
Okay.
almost a $500,000 budget. I don't know, just something to think about. Maybe
Yep.
we want to keep it the same, but,
Sure.
okay. I'm almost out of Post-its, guys. I'm almost out of Post-its. That's fine. Harbor Master has contract something, R. It just says contract R. That's all I can see because it gets cut off. I was just curious what it was. So we spent 1,500, but we budget 3,300. Oh, he says your microphone's off.
I
That,
bet they can still hear her, though.
they could still hear me anyways, that's correct.
Okay.
So that fee is for putting the docks in the water in the springtime and then removing it in the fall.
Okay. And do we have any idea what added funding is at the bottom?
No, additional funding? How
Maybe.
much is that for?
Just
$500.
500, but I just was like, what's added funding? Can we just
Yes.
add that to everyone's budget? It gives us more wiggle
Yes,
room.
I like that. Can we add a couple more zeros to ours, though?
Okay.
That's just for miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous.
Stuff
Okay.
that
Do
they
we
have.
know, so I guess what I would ask is, what account should that be assigned to, rather than just additional funding? So we can talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, we could talk about that.
Thank
It
you.
just
Probably
seems
put it
like
in
an
the
odd,
waterways.
it just seemed like an odd bucket.
There were 2 or 3 departments that had that in there. I thought I caught them all, but evidently they did not.
Harbor Master. So again, more unpopular conversations. We talked about law firms. We talked about interviewing law firms.
Yep.
We got proposals. We never did anything with that.
Yep.
I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but this budget is based on our current law firm. I don't know. It's something that we discussed interviewing and then we never.
Yeah, I think we
did.
should, I think it'd be worthwhile having that conversation again. I feel badly that we didn't, review them, and I'll take responsibility for that, I guess, because the law firms that submitted obviously took time and expense to submit something to us, but it would be something, I think, worthwhile looking at.
Okay. And I don't think that's all on you.
No, I get it, but, at the end of the day, the amount of money we've spent on legal fees has dropped. The amount of money we have in our budget are the fixed costs we pay for general litigation services, as well as labor on a monthly basis, and then there's I want to say it's about a $35,000 addition for items that may not be covered under the agreements that we have with our current law firm. But we can look at that.
Okay. I don't really have a question per se on this, but I think it would be important for you to speak to the elimination of the assistant town planner in this budget and the combination with the building department, if you just want to touch on that.
Sure. So the one impact to existing labor in the operating budget, excluding public safety, was right now we have a part-time assistant planner position in the budget. That position was reduced from full to part-time in the fiscal '25 budget. In the fiscal '26 budget, because there is such a decline in activity in the building department and the planning department, I had conversations with our new building inspector as well as our planning director, and just feel as though I can't justify, two full-time, certainly, even a full-time and a part-time right now with there are as many planning board meetings canceled as there are being held. And then the building department, again, because of the water moratorium and whatever other issues there are, the amount of permits that are being applied for have dropped drastically, and the revenues reflect that. So I looked at it a few different ways. Could you have a part-time person in each department? It would, at least on paper, be the same estimated cost. The problem, I guess the concern I had with that was, I think when somebody walks into the building and wants to speak to somebody to get some sort of a permit in the building office, there should be somebody there to answer the question. So having a full-time person support both departments while we are in this slowdown is something that I think is reasonable. Both department heads, I don't want to say they're not happy about it, but they understand the situation and are not opposed. I guess I could say that. And ideally, it's a temporary reduction in the amount of staffing we have to support those departments, because I expect in the next couple of years that things are going to start to turn around and pick back up again. And one of the costs of doing that, to offset the revenues we'll be collecting, is trying to provide additional staffing for those two departments.
Thank you.
Sure.
I know you spoke to that before.
No, it's fine.
If
Happy
anyone's
to-
watching this meeting, like.
Yep, happy to answer any questions you have.
This one, I might get something thrown at me from
I
that
got-
side of the table. Recreation?
Sure.
So I
What
have
do you
an-
want to know?
I have an answer for you. So there's 1,000.
Oh, good, even
there's-
better.
There's 1,000, so Kim was kind enough to reach out earlier today to give me a heads up on some of these questions, which has allowed me to be able to answer most of them. The Recreation Department, the question I was asked anyways, was there's $1,000 for programs,
Yep.
and the $1,000 are primarily for the concerts at the park
Okay.
in the summertime, and I'm going to brain cramp. The event on Main Street. that somebody-
Luminaries?
The luminaries are funded out of those, so those are kind of more community-wide. That's what the budget is for. The cost to run just a specific recreation program is funded through the revolving fund that they have, so.
User fees, so they pay for the
Yes,
service
yep.
and then they
So the
pay
$1,000 is the Broad Town thing, not so much a recreation thing, just where it's been budgeted for.
Well, I don't think we can get there today, but I would love to see recreation funding itself too, but I know it's too big of a budget right now. But wouldn't that be great?
What part of it? What do you mean?
I mean, in
The
general.
whole department?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be.
Anyway, just a pie in the sky. I don't have that solution right now, because obviously there's a lot of stuff here.
I mean,
But
the beach stickers would have to increase substantially.
maybe we need to be looking at it. I'm not saying we do it in 1 year. I'm just saying this
Right.
might be something that, we've been talking about making the transfer station fund itself for a while, and we're making incremental changes to get there. It's just an idea, is that in some ways, when you think about it, recreation it's user-based, right? So having more of the costs borne by the users makes logical sense. I don't know if it's possible, but,
Yeah.
and maybe not this year, but might be worth exploring.
Yeah. I think you have to take into account too all of the properties that are managed there.
Understood.
And how, the amount
May
of
not
money.
be
Right?
all of
No,
it.
but it's a thought. It's just,
Yeah.
you've got to look at Opachinski, you've got to look at
Sure.
Reed, you have to look at Grays Beach and all of those properties and how much it costs to manage that, so. it
Right,
would
and
be
how
a
much of that
significant
falls under
increase.
facilities versus parks
Right.
and rec? Sure.
And the KYSO user fees
Sure,
and
sure.
all of that would have to be taken into account. Yeah,
Food for thought.
yep.
Almost done, I swear. Something for this board to consider, and it's a little bit, it's nickel and diming, but we could consider waiving our stipends. It's $4,200.
Oh,
We could say, we're not taking it, we could take it out of the finance committee's article.
Yeah.
Then it could be out of the budget, so just think about it.
It's not a real number anyway, so.
$4,200 total, but,
It is, and I will say, so I guess I'd want to double check. We did have a Board of Assessor who has said they would forfeit the stipend that they get to be on a Board of Assessor, and I explained to the assessor, I thought we had to budget for that properly. If they wanted to donate that back to the town of Kingston, they could certainly do that.
I think, the way I
So I-
understood it, but correct me if I'm wrong, we'd have to amend the finance
that,
committee
yes.
article,
Yep,
which says who gets
Yes.
stipends and who
Yep,
doesn't, and
yep.
what that amount is.
Yep.
So if that were zeroed out for our
Exactly.
5,
Yep.
then it could be zeroed out in the budget. It would take, it's $4,200, but at
Sure.
this point,
Understood.
it's more of,
What's the-
I think it's a,
Total across the board, minus the ones
Well,
that are
you
in
have-
the office 40 hours a
it's,
week kind of thing.
oh, for what?
All of them.
For all the stipends? Well, you can't take away the stipends for the folks that are on the insurance.
Well, the town clerk, the
So.
collector,
I
treasurer.
think he's talking about
I'm
this. So
no,
there's
I'm talking about like.
talking about
the
boards.
Planning-
volunteer, I'm
yeah.
talking about boards.
Planning, assessing, water, sewer. I think that's it.
Yeah, recreation's
Yeah,
not stipends.
school
So it's,
doesn't get
no,
that
so
either.
it's just those, and there are folks on those
Sure.
boards that are receiving benefits, so they need to receive some sort of a stipend in order to be eligible for those benefits.
Yeah, I guess I would be talking about
Literally
just
do
the
it all.
yearly.
I don't know.
No, I mean, I know, like,
Okay.
school committees across the state, there was one, Swampscott, they get paid like $8,000 a year. School committee in Kingston
Wow.
gets 0. But in order to get benefits at the time that because we did look at it, nobody on school committee needed benefits at the time, but we looked at other school committees that were doing it, they said, if you just paid $1, then you can go in and do that. So if you literally change it so that everyone's just paid $1, I mean, I don't do benefits. I don't
No,
know
I
if
don't
anybody
either.
else here
No, we don't
But we
qualify
can't do
for
it
them.
anymore,
We
yeah.
don't.
Oh, okay.
So the Board of Selectmen, none of our members have been on
So
the
maybe
board
that's
that
not
long.
even.
They were
a-
grandfathered in.
Yeah, so you know what, that's probably not even an issue anymore. Just go
There,
down.
for us, no. For the
No,
other
some,
boards,
okay.
yes. Another topic that we probably were remiss in not talking about sooner, tax title properties. So we almost had an auction once. We have a new tax title custodian. That's something that we should be talking about at some point in the near future. It is, again, more potential revenue, so, and that's on long-term, I'm thinking about it that way. So just want to make sure, let's check in with Jim and see how that's going, and
I'll do that, yep.
see if
no
we can't
problem.
move the needle there.
Absolutely.
The town administrator's proposed budget for the town clerk reduces the overtime request by 2,000. Is that going to be a significant impact for him?
No.
Okay. That might be it. Yep, that's all I had.
I just have one general question, and that is there any short-term, or is it all long-term, or is there maybe even no budget gains from a DPW? Because that needs
So-
to happen.
So, included in this budget, and I frankly failed to mention it in my presentation, but if you look through the budget, there is, I've included in the budget $30,000 for a wage adjustment for a public works director. So there is going to be an increase in wages if a public works director moves forward. I think you're going to save money across the board, collaborating on different projects.
Yep.
Or, bidding, or just, and again, I think that people have done what the best they could do in the situation that they're in. I think there's an opportunity, and it's tough to quantify, but I think just by having a public works director who's in charge of streets, trees, and parks, water and sewer, at least for the day-to-day operations, they can, I think there's an opportunity to potentially save money on engineering, for example, because I think all of them use different engineers. So to be able to collaborate that, to work together, to have one engineering firm, I think there's going to be money that's going to be able to be saved and more than offset the increase in the salary that you'd have to, I think, pay to find somebody who has the experience and the capability of filling that position.
Do you foresee other potential staffing changes? So currently, those departments, most of them that would fall under DPW include a superintendent and a foreman. Do you foresee that continuing, or would we potentially consider restructuring all of the departments?
So the Public Works Department, if I understand what your question was, the Public Works Department would no longer have a superintendent. That
Okay.
position would be replaced by a Public Works Director. You'd have a foreman there.
But water and sewer
Would
would
still have
still have
Water and sewer would
superintendents
have a
and
super-
foremans.
Whatever, water's, yes.
Okay,
And, I think that, as attrition comes forward, does it make any sense? Or as just experience with having a Public Works Department, is there a need to have a superintendent moving forward whether, because of attrition, when they have the opportunities to review, positions like we do with every position that opens up? Is this what we need moving forward, or is it not? I think just the experience of if a Public Works Department is established, give it a little bit of time, and I think that will probably answer its own question.
sure.
So, yeah,
No, that helps, thank you.
sure.
Any
Sorry.
other questions?
I thought of one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
The budget that we have here, does that include any of the potentially reducing hours at the library or eliminating some of the brush chipping?
Yes.
Getting rid of Monday nights at the transfer station?
It does.
Okay, I just
So,
wanted to make sure.
in
I
my-
know we talked about it.
Yeah, in my budget message, I've identified eliminating the Monday evening hours at the transfer station. And again, I did that, there was a savings certainly, but in speaking to streets and parks, the activity up there during those hours is minimal. The brush chipping, reducing it from, I think, 7 to 3. Oftentimes, they couldn't find people, to staff the brush trimming at the transfer station. If there was a storm or something out of the ordinary, we would probably open it up additional hours to help people get rid of their brush. I propose to reduce the library budget by $25,000. That's included in my budget recommendation. And I did it as just a gross amount for two purposes. One, and the primary one, frankly, was the librarian happened to be out of town on vacation when I was trying to finalize my budget. And I thought it would give the library trustees additional flexibility as to where they could find savings in their budgets, so they wouldn't risk losing their accreditation with the state. So that $25,000 is in there.
Where also the expensive health plan drops off this
The two most expensive
year,
health
right?
plans leave or are no longer offered after July 1st, and I've accounted for what I believe to be a very conservative reduction in the health insurance because of the elimination of that, I think of $70,000.
Okay,
So I think it's going to be more than that, but nobody can really tell us.
Right.
And I'd rather, again, estimate higher than what it's going to be instead of coming back later at a later date.
okay, thank you.
Great questions. Nate, any more?
Me? No, I think
Yeah.
I'm done.
And
I said that
if it's
before,
okay with the
sorry.
board.
Oh, it's okay.
If it's okay with the board, I'll
what we're doing.
provide the answers to the board, and I'll post those on our website and also give them to the FinCom because they've already started reviewing budgets. So just so people all have the same answer, might save them a question.
I agree, and we have to question them, so that was great. Any other questions that we have for next week? If you guys think of anything before our meeting next Tuesday, it'd be great to let Keith know ahead of time, like Kim did, so that we had answers.
Yeah.
The only thing from me would be after next week, if you can just send it to me, because I'm the one that does the newsletter thing, an exact breakdown of what's going to be gone at this budget that we're, just so people are starting to get aware
Sure.
of, this is what this equals.
So what's included in the town administrator's budget for service cuts?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
no problem.
Memo too.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that we need to know?
No, I appreciate you guys coming out for an extra meeting. I know it's a tough time of year, but I think having this conversation tonight just
Right.
helps the debate next Tuesday.
And I appreciate the chiefs coming out again. I know we kind of wanted to do this last week, but, all of this was too new. We needed to kind of go through this and then ask our questions. So we appreciate both of you guys coming out a lot this year. It's good for the folks at home to know as well, what kind of calls you guys have been doing and what those statistics look like, increase in calls and whatnot, and how that affects services. And clearly, Chief Douglas, that was helpful seeing the 6-minute thing. I wasn't aware of that statistic, and that's helpful, knowing that we're at around 53% of our calls. What's that?
They haven't, I just got it today. Yep. I can
We'll
put
get it up there.
tomorrow.
Yep. So we have a budget, we have a budget tab on the front page, and everything that gets distributed to the board gets placed up on that. So that'll be up in the budget, in that budget tab sometime probably tomorrow. Along with, if it's okay with the chief to post his PowerPoint, we'll do that as well.
Yes. And what I would say is, as I said to Keith, the same to both of you, if you want to provide me the info for the newsletter for when we get to that point, what's decided, and so people know, because I don't want it's not scare tactics, I want people to know exactly what's going to happen.
No, I completely agree.
All right. What did I do with the agenda? Thank you. Do we have meeting
Selectmen
minutes?
comments? Nope.
No. All right, and no town administrators report. Any comments from the board?
I think I've done enough talking for today.
That's okay. Hopefully, we'll have more, and next week we'll have more cuts, and we'll find additional revenue, and things will work out great. So our next regular meeting is next week at 6 p.m. With that, if anyone would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.